President Trump's teenage son Barron placed an urgent call for help to police in London. That call's transcript, released by prosecutors, now key evidence in the London trial of 22-year-old Russian national accused of which he denies.
Picture the quietest kid in America's loudest family. For 2 decades, Barron Trump barely said a word, practically a ghost behind his own last name. That silence just cracked wide open. A congresswoman wants him under oath. A $10 billion lawsuit is prying his family's finances into daylight, and his name keeps landing next to men facing serious criminal allegations they deny. Tonight, we're breaking down how Barron Trump went from invisible to unavoidable, and it is not a good look. The subpoena bombshell. Let's start with the headline that stopped scrollers cold. In late July of 2026, Representative Yasamin Ansari of Arizona, a Democrat who sits on the powerful House Oversight Committee, fired off a letter to Committee Chairman James Comer. Her request wasn't subtle. She wanted a full investigation into the Trump family's ties to Andrew and Tristan Tate, and she wanted Barron Trump himself hauled in to testify about it. Ansari didn't soften her language for the cameras either. She reportedly called Barron a full-blown adult who is, in her words, very influential in the Trump White House orbit. This isn't the framing of a kid hiding behind his mother anymore. In Ansari's telling, this is a 20-year-old who allegedly helped steer his father's outreach to young male voters, and who may have had reported communications with the Tate brothers themselves, the kind of contact she says deserves to be examined under oath, not buried in a press cycle. Here's the catch, though. Comer's committee is Republican-controlled, and Republicans decide which investigations actually move forward. As of the most recent reporting, there is no public indication the chairman intends to act on a Democratic colleague's request, targeting the sitting president's own son. The subpoena, for now, is a proposal sitting in an inbox, not a summons sitting in Barron's mailbox. Multiple outlets have noted that Ansari herself seems to understand this, reportedly framing her push as one that could gain real teeth only if Democrats flip the House in November's midterms. It's also worth pointing out how Ansari framed her ask legally. She didn't just want Barron in a chair. Her letter reportedly requested subpoenas for records from the Department of Justice and the State Department tied to the Tate brothers' extradition, plus White House and federal agency visitor logs and communications. Barron's testimony was one piece of a much larger document request, meaning the ask is broader than just one name, though it's still just a letter. And whether it leads anywhere at all depends entirely on Comer. So is this political theater timed for an election cycle, or the opening shot of something far bigger? To answer that, we have to talk about exactly why a name like Andrew Tate got tangled up with Barron Trump's in the first place. And honestly, once you hear it, you'll understand why this story refused to stay quiet. The Tate connection nobody saw coming. Here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Andrew and Tristan Tate, the self-styled manosphere influencers who built an empire on shock value masculinity content, were arrested in Miami on a United Kingdom extradition warrant, just as Andrew was reportedly gearing up to co-host a bare-knuckle boxing event. The charges waiting for them back in the UK reportedly number in the dozens, including allegations of sexual assault and trafficking, with British reporting also referencing accusations involving indecent images of a child. Both brothers deny every bit of it, and it's worth stating plainly, neither has been convicted of these charges, and both are still actively fighting extradition. So why does Barron's name keep surfacing in the same sentence? According to multiple reports, Barron allegedly took part in a video call with Andrew Tate back in 2024, reportedly tied to Tate's efforts to court young male audiences through podcast appearances and online content. Some reporting pushes further, alleging Barron played a hand in steering his own father toward exactly that kind of manosphere media. Think the now famous Joe Rogan sit-down that Trump himself has publicly credited with winning over young voters, along with an interest in crypto-adjacent ventures that overlap with that same online world. Now, credit where it's due. Not every claim here is nailed down. The video call is widely reported, but at least one outlet flagged that the account rests substantially on a single Tate Associates version of events, and there is currently no public evidence Barron communicated with any government official specifically about the Tates' legal troubles. Ansari's letter itself is careful to frame this as a question, not a verdict. She wants to know whether back-channel communications between the Tate brothers, presidential advisors, and members of the First Family, Barron included, shaped how the administration handled the brothers' prosecution or extradition process. And here's the part that makes it juicier. Barron isn't the only Trump orbit name tangled up in this. Vice President J.D. Vance reportedly follows both Tate brothers online. Donald Trump Jr. publicly blasted their earlier detention in Romania as absolute insanity. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has said the president won't intervene in the extradition process, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio has waved off any suggestion of interference too. It's a small world orbiting one very controversial pair of brothers, and Barron is standing right in the middle of it. So if a handful of letters and a reported video call can spark this kind of firestorm, what happens when a federal judge starts digging through the family's actual bank accounts? Because that, unbelievably, is exactly what happened next. The $10 billion money trail. This next part of the story doesn't mention Barron by name, but stick with us, because it shows exactly the kind of scrutiny his entire family is suddenly facing. And it's a crucial piece of the bigger picture. Rewind to December of 2025. Donald Trump filed a staggering $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC, alleging the network's Panorama documentary deceptively spliced together sections of his January 6, 2021 speech to make it sound like a direct call for supporters to storm the Capitol, reportedly cutting out the part where he called for peaceful protest entirely. The fallout was reportedly immediate for the network. The BBC's Director General and its head of news both resigned according to multiple reports, and the broadcaster apologized for the edit, admitting it created what it called the mistaken impression of a direct call to violence. But the BBC refused to pay, rejecting the defamation claim outright and vowing to fight it in court. Then came a twist Team Trump reportedly did not see coming. Because the lawsuit claims both financial and reputational damages, BBC lawyers argued they were legally entitled to see the actual numbers behind those claims. In July of 2026, U.S. Magistrate Judge Angelique Lett agreed, ruling that the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust, the vehicle managing hundreds of Trump businesses, must hand over financial records dating back to January 1, 2023. All of President Trump's brand, properties, and businesses are impugned, the judge reportedly said in her ruling. Reputational, economic damages, all of that is now at issue in this case. Reportedly, Trump's own attorneys had tried to narrow the case to reputational damages only, specifically to dodge this exact outcome. It didn't work. Some reports also suggest the judge weighed in on how much the BBC can explore around Trump's intent surrounding January 6th, though the exact scope of that isn't settled and is still being fought over in court. Some outlets have also reported a tentative trial date sometime in early 2027 in Miami, though that timeline could still shift as discovery continues. So here's the through line. Two completely separate battles, one in a Florida courtroom and one in a congressional inbox, are both trying to pry open doors this family has kept locked for years. The finances, the private conversations, the influence, nobody outside the inner circle ever gets to see. And Barron, once the most fiercely protected member of the entire family, is now standing in the blast radius of both, which raises an obvious question. How did the kid nobody used to talk about end up here in the first place? From sheltered kid to political lightning rod. To understand how strange this moment really is, you have to rewind all the way to the beginning. Barron Trump was born in New York City in March of 2006, the only child of Donald and Melania Trump, and, by nearly every account, the one Trump kid who was deliberately, almost fiercely, shielded from the spotlight his entire life. While his older half-siblings built personal brands, ran campaign events, and gave sit-down interviews, Melania reportedly kept Barron almost entirely out of the press for most of his childhood. He was famously diagnosed with COVID-19 alongside his parents early in the pandemic, one of the rare moments his name made headlines as a minor. Otherwise, he grew up shuttling between Trump Tower and Mar-a-Lago, attended a private academy in West Palm Beach, and, by all reports, lived a strikingly ordinary teenage life for someone whose father was president, golf, video games, and a famously reserved personality that reportedly made him something of a mystery even to people who'd actually met him. That changed fast the moment he turned 18. He graduated from Oxbridge Academy in May of 2024, and just months later, an assassination attempt on his father thrust the entire family into a far harsher spotlight than they'd ever faced. That fall, he enrolled at NYU's Stern School of Business, and paparazzi photos of him walking to class flanked by Secret Service agents went viral almost instantly, reportedly making him one of the most photographed college freshmen in the country without him ever giving a single on-camera interview. He cast his first-ever vote that November for his own father in Florida. By January of 2025, he was standing at his father's second inauguration, visibly towering over the rest of the family, so much so that "How tall is Barron Trump?" reportedly flooded search engines that same day. His father even called him out from the podium, crediting him with pushing the campaign toward exactly the kind of podcast circuit, Joe Rogan included, that reportedly helped win over young male voters. Barron reportedly did not return to NYU's New York campus the following fall, instead said to be taking classes at the university's Washington, D.C. campus while living at the White House. There's also the spring break footnote that quietly captures just how strange his life has become. NYU's academic calendar happens to put his spring break right around his own birthday, meaning even the mundane rhythms of a normal college student's year get treated as newsworthy trivia when your last name is Trump. He was a rare sighting at Thanksgiving and New Year's Eve at Mar-a-Lago over the 2025 holidays, both described at the time as his first real public appearances in almost a year. That's the baseline we're working from. A young man whose entire brand for 2 decades was built on simply not being seen. In other words, the kid built entirely on privacy is now, according to Ansari's letter, alleged to be one of the most influential young people inside his father's administration. An allegation, not an established fact. So does the rest of his recent public life actually back that theory up, or is the real story even messier than that? Not his first headline, rodeo. Turns out, the subpoena story and the Tate connection aren't isolated blips at all. They're part of a pattern that's been quietly building for months. One tracking outlet reportedly counted over 60 stories published about Barron Trump in just the past 3 months alone. For someone who spent 18 years avoiding cameras entirely, that is a staggering reversal. Take earlier this summer. Barron reportedly skipped his eldest brother Donald Trump Jr.'s wedding in May of 2026 entirely. He didn't appear in a single sibling photo released from the event, and outlets covering the family noticed the absence almost immediately, fueling speculation about tension nobody in the family has addressed publicly to this day. Then there's the World Cup. At the 2026 FIFA World Cup final, Barron reportedly stole the spotlight from his own father after an awkward trophy presentation moment on the field. Cameras caught him relaxed backstage alongside FIFA president Gianni Infantino, while his dad faced audible boos from the crowd during the ceremony. It's a small moment in isolation, but it's telling. Even when Barron isn't trying to make news, the cameras find him anyway. And then there's the noise that never quite dies down in the background. podcast hosts, and commentators publicly speculating about his parents' handling of his upbringing, chatter about his social circle and reported friendships. And now, layered right on top of all of it, a sitting congresswoman using words like influential and accountable in the very same sentence as his name. For a young man who spent nearly 2 decades being deliberately protected from exactly this kind of attention, it's a dramatic, almost jarring reversal of fortune. Even his family history quietly feeds this pattern. Reporting on the extended Trump family has repeatedly drawn contrasts between Barron and his more public-facing young relatives, nieces and cousins who play college sports, sit courtside at championship games, and openly embrace the spotlight their surname hands them. Barron, by comparison, has spent years being the one deliberately absent from those same photos, which somehow makes it even more jarring every time he does show up somewhere unexpected. Which brings us to the question everyone actually watching this story is asking right now. Does any of it go anywhere? Or does it all quietly fade the way so many congressional letters eventually do? What happens next? Here's the honest, unglamorous truth sitting underneath all the drama. Right now, nothing here is confirmed. Barron Trump has not been charged with any crime. He has not been formally subpoenaed, and there is currently no public evidence he influenced any actual government decision regarding the Tate brothers' prosecution or extradition case. Ansari's letter is exactly that, a letter sitting on a Republican chairman's desk with zero obligation for anyone to act on it. But the timing is what makes this genuinely worth watching. Midterm elections are looming in November of 2026, and if control of the House flips even narrowly, subpoena power flips right along with it. Multiple reports suggest Democrats see this story as a card worth holding on to rather than playing immediately, meaning the Barron Trump chapter of the Tate saga could realistically go from a stalled letter to a live, headline-dominating investigation almost overnight, depending entirely on how November plays out. And this is where the story could become even more complicated. If Democrats were to gain control of the House, the political calculation surrounding Barron could change almost instantly. A request that currently appears to have little chance of moving forward could suddenly become a formal investigation, complete with demands for documents, testimony, and answers from people who have spent years operating behind closed doors. That doesn't necessarily mean Barron himself would be forced to testify. Congressional investigations can evolve in unpredictable ways, and lawmakers often begin by gathering records before deciding who actually needs to appear before a committee. But the mere possibility of his name appearing on an official witness list would be extraordinary. Barron has spent almost his entire life protected from the political circus surrounding his father, and now, at just 20 years old, he could potentially find himself pulled directly into it. There's another reason the story is attracting so much attention. Barron's public image has always been defined by what he doesn't do. He doesn't give interviews. He doesn't regularly post political opinions. He doesn't campaign alongside his father in the way other family members have. That silence has created an enormous vacuum, and whenever a new allegation or rumor emerges, people naturally rush to fill it with speculation. The question is whether that silence can survive the kind of scrutiny now gathering around him. If congressional investigators eventually decide that Barron has information relevant to their questions, staying invisible may no longer be entirely up to him. And that could mark the biggest change yet in a story that, until recently, was almost entirely about a young man who wanted no part of the spotlight. Meanwhile, the BBC lawsuit keeps grinding forward toward its February 2027 trial date, with financial records already flowing out of the family trust, and reportedly more discovery fights still ahead before a jury ever hears a single word of testimony. Two completely separate legal threads, both circling the same family, both fully capable of pulling in names nobody expected to end up on a witness list. There's also a broader lesson buried in all of this, one that applies well beyond just Barron. When a lawsuit or a congressional letter gets filed, it doesn't just target the person named at the top of the page, it opens a door. Discovery tools, subpoena powers, document requests, once triggered, they have a way of reaching into the people standing closest to the center of power, whether or not those people ever expected to be pulled in. Family members, aides, advisors, even apparently the one son who spent his entire life trying to stay out of frame. For a young man who once seemed determined to stay out of every single camera frame, Barron Trump is now sitting squarely at the intersection of two of the biggest legal and political stories touching his father's second term. Whether he ever actually testifies about any of it, or whether this whole chapter fades quietly into just another unfulfilled congressional request, one thing is already undeniably true. The era of Barron Trump staying invisible is officially, unmistakably over. So there you have it. From silent shadow to potential subpoena target, Barron Trump's quiet years may be closing faster than expected. Depending on who controls Congress after November, this story could flip from a stalled letter to must-watch testimony overnight, and we'll be tracking every twist right alongside you. Want to stay ahead of whatever breaks next in this saga? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because our next deep dive is one you will not want to miss.